Name's Nate. I am the marketing and community lead for Laterpress, and this is the debut of a weekly stream series that I'm going to be doing, showing off the Laterpress AI features and how they can be used. It is obviously a product demonstration for Laterpress and all of our features, but I hope beyond that to do my small part to help elevate the conversation about the intersection between technology and creativity, show the importance of having a human in the loop, show where I am bringing ideas into things, where I'm riffing on the AI, how I change things, edit things to infuse it with my own personality and make sure that the resulting outputs are the story that I want to be telling. So that's kind of what we're going to be doing today. There is a 15-second delay roughly between my speech and what you hear on YouTube. Also, I have my main working screen in front of me, and the chat is over to the side, so I have to look over to that. So if there is any delay in responding to chat or looking into messages, blame that on the delay, but I will do my best to be responsive to questions as we go. And so rather than whip through all of the process as a tech demo, just to try to, bang, 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 show how everything works, since this is going to be a 2-hour stream, I really want to take my time with things, explain my thought process, show what I'm doing, why I am doing it the way I'm doing it, to give people a full flavor of the experience. So we're not going to have a finished book at the end of 2 hours. No way. I don't even know how much of a draft we'll have done, but I will probably do a couple chapters just to kind of show off various elements of the things, and we can dive into further depth on future streams. So I'm going to switch over to the screen here. You can see my Laterpress account, but before we even start creating a book or working through the story features, I spent some time yesterday thinking through an idea that I would want to do as a story. What did I think would be fun and interesting to riff on, in front of an audience using AI? What can we figure out? So that's kind of, I want to start by talking about the story idea I have and my own ideas that I'm bringing into this before we even bring AI into the process. What format do you want us to write questions in? Just in chat is fine. Probably a capital letter Q at the beginning, so it's clear to me that that it's a question. But just popping questions in chat is completely fine. But yeah, if you could put a Q in front of it, then I'll know it's a question that's directed at me. That helps. So I spent some time yesterday afternoon thinking through a story concept and coming up with a basic riff on things. So what we're going to be working on here is an urban fantasy rom-com, because I like fantasy, and I will admit that I do enjoy some romantic comedies. I like laughs, I like humor, I like lightheartedness, and a core part of the romance genre is the happy ending guaranteed. So I think that would be a fun thing to riff on. So I wrote down some notes. So here's the basic concept that we're starting from before we do anything within Laterpress's story tools. So my concept is, in a modern city where magic and technology intertwine, Cupid, a fantasy dating app, matches two people who at first seem all wrong for each other. When their disastrous first date ends, they discover they are trapped in a 60-minute time loop orchestrated by the app, which will not let them leave until they realize they're a perfect match for each other. Every loop, they have to navigate magical hijinks, a meddling app with a mind of its own, and their personal shortcomings. Cupid will not end the loop until the couple realizes what the app already knows, that they are a perfect match for each other. In this universe, the gods of ancient mythology are real, living beings. While myths exaggerate their power, they are still powerful and immortal beings. They could be celebrities, politicians, CEOs, and this is kind of background, but because of the loneliness epidemic, growing number of adult singles, and declining birth rates, kind of paralleling real life a bit, The love goddess Aphrodite decided she needs to work her magic at scale, establishing Aphrodite Incorporated. They're the makers of the Cupid app that has completely upended dating as we know it. So that's kind of the backdrop for this romantic comedy. Then I'll have a small cast of characters. I want to keep things simple, not confuse myself or the AI with a bloated cast, especially because with the time loop structure and repeating things over and over, the more characters that get added into that, the more difficult things are going to be. And the trick with time loops is some repetition is good because you need to establish the loop and the rules of the game, but you also don't want things to be overly repetitive. There needs to be variance in each loop. You know, when the characters become aware of what's going on, they're going to intentionally try to break the rules and mix things up. So I wanted to have a small cast. So there's really only 4 primary characters here. The first, our female lead, her legal name is Bastet, after an Egyptian goddess. She prefers to go by Tessa, and her job is a therapist for familiars, because your magical pets need therapy sometimes too. One of her personal failings is she has a penchant for speaking in therapy speak, as if she's on the job as a therapist, even when she's not. She herself has a familiar named Artemis, another god name. I'm planning to make some jokes about that in the book. Artemis is a black cat with no filter, no chill, is the type of character to say all of the things that Tessa does not want said. I love animal companions and having them as intelligent side characters. I've discovered that's kind of one of my things as a fantasy author. I love doing it, so I'm going to do it again. Our male lead, his legal name is Edgar, after Edgar Allan Poe, who does also exist in this universe. He prefers to go by Eddie. One thing the 2 characters will discover in common is that they both think their legal names are cringe and that their parents were a bit pretentious to name them the way that they were named. Eddie makes his living as a consultant for what they call the corporeally disadvantaged, aka the dead or spirits of the dead. He works with them to help them resolve their lingering regrets so that their spirits can pass on to the afterlife. And then our kind of antagonist character is Cupid, the app itself. It's a dating app with a god complex. It insists it's the perfect matchmaker. It will not take no for an answer. If you 2 got matched up, it's going to be smooches and marriage and babies, and the app will not allow you to think differently. And the conceit of the universe is that the app is actually correct. So for most of the book, Cupid is going to be played as an antagonist, but as our characters' emotional journeys progress, they will start to see that the app actually had it right, but their own baggage got in the way of them seeing a good thing for what it is, and them working through it, plus some magical hijinks and funny shenanigans, gets them to their happy ending. That is kind of the general structure of what I want this story to achieve. So those are my initial notes. So now in my demo account here, I've got 4 different series set up. I'm not going to place this in any of them. We're just going to click Add Story. Before I do that, over here, the Laterpress AI account. This demo account has the top tier subscription, which is why I have 500,000 credits a month. I took a screenshot of this so nobody has to remember, but pay attention that we've already used 4,955 credits, so that as I start using skills and doing things, you have an idea of how many credits I have actually used to accomplish the things that I want to accomplish. But I'm going to go in here, and so I'm going to add a story, and I don't have a formal name for this story yet. My joke running title for it is The Dating Will Continue Until Compatibility Improves. I cannot talk and type at the same time. We're just going to pretend I spelled things correctly. And now here at the generate outline stage, you can start from scratch and type in your story seed and an idea, or you can use existing notes that you've already had to help the system create an outline. Now, since I already wrote this entire, call it a page of notes, I'm going to copy and paste this over. And we're going to go from my existing notes, hit the paste button. Okay, so all of my notes are in here. And I want to select, I'm going to go fantasy urban, I think, with this, just because I want the system to understand we're talking fantasy. Now this whole step can be skipped if you want to get right into the editor and start noodling with things, but I'm going to show this off for the sake of the demonstration and being as thorough as possible with everything. What is with the script option? The script option is currently in beta. We have not rolled that out wide to people yet. You're seeing it because my account has admin privileges. So that is something that will be coming. But we are working on tools for script writers to be able to write scripts within our editor with or without the use of AI. So to answer that question, that is another writing mode that we are working on, but have not yet released. Okay, so I've got my notes in here. I'm going to use my existing notes. Now I'm going to click Get Started. And so now it's going to read through everything that I wrote down there and generate some characters. And what we're looking for here is that the character cards it creates respect my source material. And I may need to edit them for any changes. As long as it's close, we're good to go here. So here we go. Protagonist, Tessa, legal name Bastet. She's a therapist specializing in magical familiars. In dating, she catastrophizes, spotting potential red flags and shutting down connections before they can develop. This is all accurate. Now, depending on how the AI likes to use things, I may delete that her legal name is Bastet. I don't want the AI putting that in right away. That is something I want to reveal later. So we're going to keep an eye on that. Eddie is a consultant for the corporeally disadvantaged, so it has a good summary of my notes. And again, you can always just call out the summaries and post your originals if you want. It has given them some physical. I don't think I got it right here for physical characteristics. Those are more personality characteristics. So I'm probably going to go in and edit these. Artemis supporting. It correctly identified Cupid as the antagonist. Cupid is Aphrodite Inc.'s flagship dating app and apparently flawless matchmaker with a benevolent dictator streak and a self-justified god complex. Its magically enforced non-disclosure agreement keeps users from describing what really happens, protecting the brand while preserving the app's mystique and leverage. In Tessa and Eddie's case, Cupid orchestrates a 60-minute time loop, engineering scenarios and hijinks until they confront their shortcomings and recognize their compatibility. Whether it's truly caring or merely optimizing outcomes is part of its unsettling charm. And it's got Aphrodite in here as a supporting character as well. I'm not entirely sure that I would want to keep Aphrodite in here, but I did mention her. For now, I'm going to keep this and continue. I do not spend an excessive amount of time at the generate outline stage when I am working through things. I like to get the baseline and then start digging deep into the editor. And all of this stuff can be edited within the editor after its initial generation. So you do not need to think that you're married to whatever comes up here. And, if your notes are extremely detailed and you're happy with them as exactly as is, this entire step could be skipped. And then you can make things manually from within the editor, which I will show off later. So it took my notes now and it spun off some lore ideas. Quite a few, actually. The modern location, the modern mythic city, working setting. Yeah, we're going to change the name there. A contemporary high density metropolis where everyday technology coexists with publicly acknowledged magic. Um, living pantheons and public divinity. So it's establishing from my notes background details. It created Aphrodite Inc. as a corporation within the universe. Cupid, the fantasy dating app, as a technology. Acknowledgement of Cupid binding terms, the magical non-disclosure agreement that keeps people who have been matched by Cupid from talking about what the matchmaking experience was like with other people, to keep that mystique. The mention of the 60-minute loop, familiars, therapists, the corporeally disadvantaged. Now, see, I meant that as a joke. It's made as a lore entry. All of these lore items and things get added as context when the AI is generating things to help the story stay truer to your universe. So it is good to have those things. And these are things, it's good to have a basic starting on these. I would probably drill into some of these, maybe delete a few or alter the wording on things. But like I said, I don't micromanage at this stage. I let it do what it's going to do, and then we tweak it later. Now, when we get to at the outline stage here, we have about 24 different genre templates pre-made that people can use to as a working plot structure and outline for a book. If you do not like any of these, you do have the ability to go in and create your own. So if there's a specific plot structure you like, or for your specific format and story flow, you kind of know what the beats are and how you want to hit them, you can create that yourself. I might need to tweak things, being the nature of a time loop, but for starters, I want to see what it's going to do with the romantic comedy template. And now when I click generate here, generate outline before, I could do nothing and just click generate, and the AI is going to generate an outline with the information that it already has. But I would recommend not doing that. And instead, here, before you generate the outline, give it very specific instructions. This is your chance to be the executive producer or an editor and make sure that you're giving the AI a sense of direction on where you see the story going. So for this, I would probably put in the app Cupid appears to be an antagonist throughout the book. But as the book goes on, it becomes clear that Cupid is actually correct about this couple being an ideal match. The time loops should be a mixture of comedic moments that require them to work together, and situations that require them to address their own personal shortcomings. So let's see what it does with that. How do you modify the outline beats for the story? Are you talking like the template itself, or editing the beats once they've been generated? I can show you both. So first we're going to let it finish generating this outline. And then I'm not going to edit it. I'm not even going to read it at this stage because all of it can be edited later. So I'm just going to accept it to get into the text editor, and then I can start showing some things off to answer your question. So generating takes an outline. There's a lot going on with that, a lot of context it needs to digest, beats it needs to think about, and how to fill all of those in. So this process can take a couple minutes. If anybody else has any other questions at this stage, feel free to let me know and I will answer those. Otherwise, as soon as this is done, we'll get into the editor and start diving in. Yeah, this is the other thing to understand with AI is the more you're asking it to do, the longer it can take to think things through and generate. Generating an outline is probably one of the most time consuming tasks because of the amount of information it needs to process. It needs to take a look at your concept, all of the lore entries that have been generated thus far, the characters, the specific notes you've given it about how you want the story to flow and what it should prioritize. So now we have a working outline. And now I could click regenerate here. I can modify all beats. I can clear everything and start over again. Like I said, you can edit and modify things here, but you do not have to. And generally, I don't. I just accept it and then get into the editor. I'm going to do my editing there. How long? Generating the outline, anywhere from 1 to 3 minutes on average, I would say, from my experiments on that. It's enough to enter the information you want, click generate, take a quick bathroom break, get a drink of water, pace around the room a couple times, come back, and it's going to be there. So we now have a working outline. We'll get to this in a minute, but you'll see now that when I accepted things and I went into the editor, in the wiki section here, this is the home for all of the notes about the story. And for the main idea, the concept, it took my notes and it put them in here as the idea and the main concept. Here for characters, we have character cards representing the different characters in the story. And now if I want to edit one of these, here's physical characteristics, mental characteristics, personal skills. The eye icon here tells the AI whether or not this is visible. So when the eye is up like this, the AI is able to know that character trait. If you click the eye and you see the slash through it, the AI will not read that specific line. Now, the reason that exists is in case you want to have some specific details written down in your notes, but you do not yet want the AI to know about them. For example, let's say you're writing a story where a character is a vampire, but you don't want the AI writing anything to mention or allude to that character being a vampire because that is something that you're going to reveal later. Then you could put in here, this person is a vampire, click that button so that that detail is invisible to the AI and it's not going to talk about that. And then later on, you can uncheck that, and now it's going to, start incorporating that detail into what it writes. So that is the intent of that specific checkbox there. In lore, we've got all of the lore cards that were generated. And in settings here, this is an important box that I will get back to, the pro style. I recommend doing something with this field to help refine the output to sound more like you, but we'll come back to that. So all of these were generated. We can generate more characters later by clicking generate. You can also add characters or lore cards or scene cards and spell out, are they a protagonist, antagonist, or supporting character? either generate details about them or just type in your own notes here and then save. So these note-taking features work with or without AI. So do with those what you will. But now, for the question about how do you modify the beats for the story. So I'm going to start with the default templates here. If you've got all of your beats generated like this, and you want to change or edit something about them, then up here is the button to click and edit. And you've got a few options here. You can modify all beats. If you click that, you can give it instructions for what you want changed, and it's going to take that under advisement as it revises the entire outline. Otherwise, you can modify one beat, which is only going to apply to the specific one that you have selected. You can regenerate the beats. You can clear everything. So you've got a few other options, or you can manually go in here and delete phrases, rephrase things, punch up the descriptions. So that's how it would work in the existing outlines. Now, for making your own, you'd want to go into the Laterpress AI tab here and click Customize Story Tools. And in here, the plot tool, this is exclusive to admins like me. You're not going to see this on your account. You should see draft, edit, and outline. When you go into outline, users are going to see all of our default templates, and you're not going to be able to edit those. Our default templates are not editable, but you will be able to see the names of the beats and the descriptions, so you'd be able to see what they are without having to select them in the editor. But here you can also click Add Outline, and you could call it something like mind-bending sci-fi thriller. I guess the character limit is too small for that. Limit to 20 characters. My book. Enter a description for it. Sci-fi thriller. Something that helps you recognize it as your outline. And then, excuse me, you would name the beat and write your description for it. I'm hopping across genres here, but if this is like a cop thriller, it might be, the cold open, and this is the crime that we will spend the rest of the book solving. Beat 2, introduce the cops. I very quickly pivoted from sci-fi thriller into police procedural, I guess, but that's because I've been watching too many episodes of police procedurals lately. So, in there, like I said, I can't talk and type at the same time, but you would write the name of the beat, the description for what the beat is doing. The more descriptive you can be about the purpose of the beat, the better, because that gives the AI direction on your intent and what is supposed to be happening in each one of those beats. I'm being lazy and just putting in short descriptions here to kind of show off the system and how it works. And so you can keep adding beats, as many beats as you think you need. There is a limit to this. I can't remember if we set the limit at 50 or 99, but you can eventually run out. But you're able to plug in everything you need. I believe the minimum is 3. Case closed. Bad guy arrested. And so now my book. So this is another feature that only I have, is enabled for all customers. This allows me to create something and then everybody on Laterpress has access to that template. That's how I use the system I used to generate the 24 default outlines. Is that I went into this system and I manually put in each of the name, the description, and each of the beats. So you have access to the exact same tools that I am using for that sort of thing. There's no top secret tech as far as this goes that I have access to that you don't. So you can do all of this. Click save. And now I'm not going to do this with this book because we have a generated outline. But, if I create another book here, and let's just skip the outline phase, and it's been a while since I've done this without the wiki settings, show. Okay, there, show outline. So now if I want to, it's going to put in the default 3-act structure if it doesn't have a template to work from. But if we go into customize here, then I can scroll through all of the templates that we made. I can select my book, save, and now here is the very badly written 3-beat template that I just came up with. But if you're working on something and you want to say, you know what, that template's not working for me, I think this is better as a courtroom drama, you can change the template. The only word of caution I would give is that if you change the template, it's going to delete the text that was in the beats. So if you have already generated an outline and you wanted to keep any portion of that, then copy and paste that text out so that you have it saved before you switch the outline, and then put text back into beats where you think it belongs. I just warn everybody that, it doesn't save the text because it doesn't know where it's supposed to go when you're radically changing genres. So make sure you save that beforehand. So now let's get back into our book here, editing the draft. And so the next thing I want to do before I go any further is I want to review the outline as written, see what it thinks a good plot line is going to be. And I like to read the entire thing and get the context on where it sees things going before I start digging in and micromanaging it and changing things. Because I want to see its whole flow so that I have a holistic idea of where do I agree with where I thought the story should go, where does it disagree, do I just need to make some edits to a few specific beats, do I need to make some large scale editorial feedback, and regenerate things. The outline, I would not rush this step once you're in the editor, because the scene cards that it generates are going to be derived not only from the specific beat, but the outline as a whole, with the intent that every scene works to advance the plot in the direction it wants to go. So if you rush through this and you have a plot that doesn't quite match your intention, it's not where you want it to be going, and then you start generating scene cards on that, then you're going to get scene cards that also do not match your intent of your vision and where you want things to go. And if you start generating scene text, the written chapters off of those scene cards, you can see mistakes compound upon themselves. It's kind of, garbage in, garbage out. So for each step in the process, it's important to make sure that you like what you see before you move on to the next step, because if you're not happy on the outline, the chapters you get, you're not going to like those either. So it takes time to edit through things, look things over, and that is the reality of working with AI, that the systems can very quickly give you an idea. They can give you plot line. They can give you raw text. Mm, if you're writing a book with AI and incorporating it into your creative process, a very small percentage of your time is actually going to be using the AI, and the large majority of it is going to be reviewing output, reading through it, making sure that it is what you want, editing it, refining it, moving on to the next step. I thought I saw a question here. Is the method you use to make an outline easy to perform? Yeah, I think so. It's just going in here high speed again. Laterpress AI, customize story tools, outline, add an outline. Enter your information, save it when you're happy. Um, you can find you can do a search online for plot templates. If you already have a good sense of the plot flow of your book, then you could write your own. You can change things as you go. So if you have here's a coming of age, this is public, so I'm not going to change this. But if you think, what, that beat isn't any good, you can click the X here just to delete that beat out of your outline. You could add another beat in there later. So I think that system's pretty easy to work with. I haven't had to make any changes in there for a while because I made a pretty wide selection of basic templates, so I tend to work off of those to start. And only if I feel like my idea is completely incompatible with one of those genre templates, then I go back in and I do some more real tweaking or coming up with something that is very purpose built for a specific story. And so now we do some digging in, looking at our plot beats. Because, like I said, I need to know what is going on here, how it sees the plot structure going before I dig in any deeper. So I'm going to blow this up here so that it's bigger so that these beats are bigger and easier to read on screen. And we're going to review it together. So in our standard ordinary rom-com setup, we have the ordinary life, show each lead in their everyday elements, emphasizing quirks, flaws, or routines that will later clash in funny ways. We open on two parallel mornings in the modern Mystic City. And here you can already see the effect of, because I did not change things in the early stage with giving the city a proper name, it's treating modern Mythic City as the name of the city. So that is something I definitely need to go in and change, give the town a proper name. So I'm flagging this as something that needs to pay attention to, but at the moment we're not going to do anything with it. We're going to review and move on. Tessa is in her cozy, plant-filled office, mid-session with an anxious Phoenix familiar who keeps stress-molting embers onto her couch. She handles it with warm, practiced calm. Let's name the feeling before it combusts the upholstery. While Artemis watches from a bookshelf, muttering that Tessa gives better advice than she takes. Across town, Eddie is in a cramped apartment couch beside the translucent ghost of an elderly woman who refuses to move on until someone finds her lost recipe box. He's earnest, energetic, and already juggling 3 other spirit cases on his phone, texting closure updates while simultaneously promising the ghost he'll handle everything today. Both are good at their jobs, clearly caring people, and both are conspicuously alone. Tessa's phone buzzes with a Cupid notification she's been ignoring for weeks. Eddie's buzzes with one he signed up for this morning because a ghost's client's dying regret, I never tried hard enough to find love, rattled him. The parallel scenes end with each of them, for very different reasons, finally tapping accept match. Now we move on here. So before their date, we get a deeper glimpse into what holds each lead back. Tessa reviews her Cupid match profile and immediately begins cataloging concerns. So she's already profiling him. Artemis tells her She's already writing a breakup scene for a man she hasn't met. Meanwhile, Eddie is prepping for the date with the intensity of a man defusing a bomb, reservations, backup reservations, conversation topics indexed on his phone, breath mint regimen. His ghost client, still hovering in his apartment, gently observes that Eddie seems more afraid of wasting the evening than being excited about it. Here's another thing that I would change. Eddie should not be planning dates with ghost clients in the room. That feels very unprofessional. I don't think Eddie would do that. But like I said, my first step is always to see the shape of things and see what we're looking at, and then start diving in and making changes. The other thing I would say is, with this outline so far, I have my own idea of where the story would go, and I think this structure makes it take a little bit too long to get to them initially meeting. So I'm already thinking through my head some ideas on how I want to change this. The meet cute or meet disaster. Tessa and Eddie meet in a trendy restaurant in the city's charm regulated nightlife district, where ambient enchantments are supposed to keep the mood relaxed. It goes wrong almost immediately. Eddie arrives 15 minutes early and has already reorganized the table setting, ordered a conversation starter appetizer, and prepared an opening monologue about how he believes in being radically honest about intentions, which he delivers the moment Tessa sits down before she's even taken off her coat. Tessa's therapist alarm bells start mentally clanging. She mentally labels him as love bombing, possible codependency. She responds with careful clinical deflections, which Eddie interprets as cold rejection. Artemis, who insists on coming and is perched on the back of Tessa's chair, mutters loud enough for both to hear, "This is already a disaster and the bread hasn't arrived." The ambient mood, charms in the restaurant, possibly nudged by Cupid, malfunction, causing a candle between them to flare dramatically every time one of them says something emotionally dishonest. By the time the entrees arrive, the candle has nearly set the tablecloth on fire twice. Eddie has accidentally revealed he refers to talking points, and Tess has been caught mid-text asking a friend to call with a fake emergency. Okay, I like some of that. The date ends with both of them storming out in opposite directions, only to find no matter what street they turn down, they end up back at the restaurant entrance. Their phone simultaneously ping with a Cupid notification, match incomplete, resetting. Okay, so there is some good bones in there. I like a few of the jokes. I would make some tweaks here. I would punch some things up, but it understood the assignment here with things going badly. So we're marching in the right direction. Next beat: early banter and conflict. Quick-witted exchanges, misunderstandings, or comedic rivalry showcase attraction beneath the bickering. The first time loop resets them to the moment just before Eddie's opening monologue, but now both Tessa and Eddie retain full memory of the disaster. They're bewildered, angry, and for the first time forced to actually talk to each other honestly, because pretense seems pointless when you've already watched a candle try to immolate your breadbasket. Eddie, rattled, drops the rehearsed script and blurts. Now, here's one thing: if I was going to run a modify all beats or modify specific beats, is tell it, give me just the facts. I don't need you to write dialogue in what you're coming up with in the beat. That's something I'm trying to work on with the default prompts too. Is just give me the facts. Don't write the scenes. But what it is giving us, you gave a TED talk about vulnerability before I knew your last name. It's getting the vibes right. Artemis provides running commentary, awarding points like a judge at a debate tournament. That Artemis has no filter and no chill. That seems on brand. Beneath the bickering, though, something sparks. They're both quick, both funny, and both clearly passionate about their work. When Eddie accidentally mentions a ghost client who reminded him of his grandmother, Tessa's clinical mask slips and she asks a genuinely curious question. When Tessa admits she became a familiar therapist because she understood what it felt like to be made for a purpose you're failing at, Eddie goes quiet with recognition. The loop resets again before either can sit in the moment. Cupid's notification reads closer, but not enough. Um, so we're in the early banter and conflict stage. I think this is a little too emotionally on the nose. Um, they're understanding the assignment too quickly. They just got into a time loop where, as he's noting here, this is some kind of magical hostage situation. So you're correct. Um, I don't know that people's first instinct in that sort of situation is going to be to immediately obey the assignment and follow instructions. Um, I certainly wouldn't. I think there'd be a little bit more of an FU there and them trying to uh, go their separate ways before they resign themselves that this is their reality and start digging in. So I might make some changes here, respecting the banter and that they need to start getting to know each other, but not quite them buying into the situation as fast as it is, especially because our next beat coming up in this general flow is forced proximity. This is the beat now where I think by the third loop, exactly, Tessa and Eddie have started to accept their grim reality. Cupid will not release them until it's satisfied, and the 60-minute window is their entire world. They attempt to simply wait out in stubborn silence at the restaurant, but Cupid has other plans. The app begins altering the loop's conditions, as it should, because a time loop where nothing changes is boring if it's just going to be the same thing over and over again. So we want that. This time, instead of resetting them to the restaurant, they find themselves locked inside a haunted escape room that has materialized in the restaurant's back hallway, complete with a spirit who won't stop weeping about a love letter he never sent. A little too on the nose for Eddie there. The room's puzzles both require both their skill sets. Eddie must communicate with the ghost to learn clues, while Tessa must use her therapeutic insight to help the spirit articulate what he actually regrets. The clues become coherent. They're forced to work side by side, and the contrast between them becomes comedy gold. Eddie charges ahead, trying to solve everything at once, while Tessa insists on processing each emotional layer before moving forward. Artemis bats a puzzle piece off the table and tells both of them they're insufferable, but they solve it together just barely, and in a moment of shared triumph, they share a look that neither of them can entirely dismiss. The loop resets. Cupid's message: see, you work well together. Imagine if you actually tried. Um, this as much as I earlier said I don't like it when the beats give dialogue, that I would probably keep because that does seem like an accurate piece of Cupid's character. Moments of goofy connection. Over the next several loops, Cupid cycles through increasingly absurd scenarios that force vulnerability through sheer ridiculousness. In one loop, a misfired charm turns Eddie temporarily invisible, and only Tessa can hear him, so she has to navigate a crowded night market while he whispers directions and commentary into her ear, leading to a scene where she's laughing so hard at his running narration of a passerby that strangers think she's lost her mind. In another, Artemis magically enlarged the size of a panther, and they have to work together to sneak her through a subway station without causing a panic, bickering like co-parents over the world's most uncooperative cat. In a quieter loop, they end up on the roof of the restaurant after a fire escape mishap, sitting under enchanted city stars. So now, we've got some magical hijinks. We've got a quieter moment. Even if I don't necessarily love the exact dynamics of the scene, that flow is how I would want it to go. With some higher intensity beats and then settling into some quiet. So it's getting the flow right. And that this is a good starting point that I can work from. Tessa tells Eddie she wants to be a dancer, demonstrates with a clumsy, joyful spin that makes him clap. He admits he wanted to be a stand-up comedian and tells her a joke so bad she groans but can't stop smiling. These loops aren't about solving anything. They're about two people discovering they genuinely like each other when they stop performing. Artemis, watching from a fire escape railing, quietly purrs for the first time in the story. So now we're seeing the characters are starting to learn a little bit more about each other. They are starting to like each other, We are seeing some progression in that dynamic, escalating antics and complications. Just as a genuine connection is forming, Cupid raises the stakes and the chaos. The loops begin targeting their specific flaws with surgical precision. In one iteration, Cupid generates a scenario where Eddie encounters a spirit whose regret mirrors his own. And instead of helping the ghost, Eddie spirals, becoming so intense about not wasting this chance with Tessa that he proposes a pact to commit to a second date before the loop even ends. Tessa, triggered by his intensity, retreats into full therapist mode. Artemis tries to intervene and is magically muted by Cupid for spoiling the process. Meanwhile, Cupid introduces new complications. A doppelganger of Eddie appears, representing a safer match for Tessa. And doppelganger of Tessa appears for Eddie, enthusiastic, agreeable shower. The fakes are Cupid's way of showing them what they think they want versus what they actually need. Both leads are tempted briefly, and both are disturbed by how hollow the perfect on paper alternatives feel. The loops are getting harder, the scenario is more emotionally pointed, and the comedy now carries an edge of real frustration with Cupid, with each other, and with themselves. This part is good. The loop's getting harder. We're escalating tension as we should be. I'm not entirely sure that I love the idea of them being shown duplicates, but we're on theme here. And I also don't know that I'm not sure that I want this kind of regression, where Eddie is spiraling. But like I said, we are studying the outline and seeing its starting point, thinking through where it's going, and then tweaking things to ultimately serve our intent and where we want to go with things. Here's our big fight. This is kind of the dark hour of any romantic comedy where things are at their worst. Cupid engineers its cruelest test yet. It replays a highlight reel of their previous loops on every screen in the restaurant for the entire dining room to see. Eddie, mortified but characteristically bold, turns to Tessa and says this is proof they have something real, that they should stop fighting it. But he says it with all his old intensity dialed to 11. Yeah, he's reminding me of this is going to be a niche reference, but if anybody's played the most recent Like a Dragon video games, he's sounding like Ichiban Kasuga here, overly intense and emotional. Tessa's overwhelmed. Yeah, so they're kind of falling back to baseline here, and I would need to push that a little harder. She tells him clinically and devastatingly this confusing trauma bonding with connection, that the loop is manufacturing intimacy and that nothing that happens here is real. That's actually really good. I'm keeping that for her personality as kind of a, things are going well, we're having fun, we're bonding, we're growing, and then she's going to be like, oh wait, this is all BS. This is all rigged. I'm trapped in a game. This isn't what I can see that. For me, I buy that as a regression for her. So that is a detail I would definitely keep in here. For the first time, his confidence cracks entirely. I think he's already had one regression, so I don't know about that. Maybe you're right. Maybe I don't know what real feels like. Artemis gets the voice back in here. And it's now the Dark Knight, where how many beats are left in this outline? The Dark Knight, the grand gesture. Okay, there's 3. So we're reflecting on the bad thing that happened. Cupid is separating them. Tessa finds herself alone in an empty restaurant. Eddie is alone on the rooftop where they once sat under the stars. For the first time, the clock isn't ticking toward a reset. Cupid has paused the loop, giving them time to sit with what happened. Tessa stares at her phone, where the Cupid displays a simple interface, a scrolling log of every relationship she's ended prematurely. each one tagged with red flag. She cited in the follow-up note showing that the person went on to have healthy, happy relationship with someone else. Um, and now here's another thing where the AI is not wrong to have generated this based on its understanding of the story and the context I gave it, and is pointing out to me a gap in what I wrote down in the notes, which is that I do not think I properly explained that in my head, there are not multiple, you do not go on multiple dates before you find a match. That there's kind of a long background process where the app is scanning lots of people. There's a long interview process. Once it's made your match, it has made your match. I didn't tell it that. I did not write that down in my notes. That was a detail that was in my head and not committed to the page. And therefore, it is not represented here. And that results in a detail that is in conflict with my headcanon. And so that would be okay. Like, I need to go back, I need to be more specific with notes and details about how Cupid works um, before I go back and start generating things so that future generations are more accurate to my understanding of the app. So I want to point that out as an example where I didn't get what I wanted, but I consider that my fault for not providing enough background context. However, it does spin this in a correct direction. From there, the evidence is damning and undeniable. The problem was never the people she dated. Artemis sits beside her and shares something she's never said. I appeared in your life because you needed someone who wouldn't leave no matter how many reasons you invented. But I can't be the only one who stays, Tessa. That was never supposed to be enough. And again, here's another area where I didn't provide context on where Artemis comes from or why Artemis is a part of Tessa's life. That is actually pretty close to where I saw things. So I do like that, my thoughts were on the same page there. And so I'm going to start skimming a little bit here because we're getting towards the end. But it looks like it has each of them separated to have their own quiet moment. And now we're back with the loop resumes of both of them back at the restaurant table, reset to the original first date position. But now we're being more genuine. They work out their details, and everybody has a happy ending. The moment they reach each other's hand across the table, every phone in the restaurant times simultaneously. Cupid's interface transforms into a warm glow. The final notification appears on both their screens. Match complete. Thank you for your patience. Mine, not yours. You two were exhausting. Good snark. The restaurant shimmers and time lurches forward. The time loop dissolves and they're deposited back into the real flow of the evening, right where the disastrous date ended, except now they're standing on the sidewalk together, holding hands with the memory of every loop intact and the rest of the world none the wiser. And that detail right there, the rest of the world none the wiser, is exactly how I would frame how that magic works too. Eddie looks at Teresa and says, Tessa and says, so, second date? Tessa, grinning, replies, how about we just finish this one first? They walk back into the restaurant, sit down, have the meal they never actually got to eat. Artemis hops onto the chair beside Tessa, for once has nothing to say. In a brief epilogue, we see Tessa back in her office the next day, and when her friend asks her about her Cupid experience, she opens her mouth to explain, and the magical non-disclosure agreement kicks in, turning her words into a vague, cheerful, it was an experience, I'd recommend it. That is also exactly how I would see that scene working, is people are allowed to say, hey, Cupid's great, I recommend it, worked. But beyond that, nobody can say anything about what their specific experience with the app was or what it did. That's part of the mystique. Artemis smirks. Okay, so we have our epilogue here. So that is kind of its general outline of where it saw the story going. Now, let's say I can dig into the weeds here and start editing this beat by beat. For showing something off, I want to try something a little bit different. And I'm going to go into the assistant tab here where we've got this is a space where you can give it context. You can say, I wanted to look at all of the chapters. We don't have any generated yet, but I can have it look at the characters, the lore, and the outline is this, all of these beats that we're looking at. And I can have it review things. I'm going to go to GPT. Yeah, we'll do 4.1 for this. We are working on some changes to the assistant to incorporate more models, including Claude models, so that you can talk with Claude directly in here. And Claude would have the context of the story. But this is kind of like having a creative partner on demand who is not going to tell you your ideas are dumb, is not going to get tired of listening to you want to reiterate on the same plot point for 3 hours continuously. So you can fire it off any kind of questions. So I'm going to start very broad here just to kind of see what it thinks before we start diving in and changing up these beats. And I'm going to say, please review the outline. Can't talk and type at the same time. What do you see as the strengths of the outline? Does anything strike you as a weakness that needs to be changed? So now the assistant is going to scan through all of these plot beats and all of the other context and offer its thoughts. And, my purpose here is not to be a yes man to any of its suggestions. It's giving me food for thought on what's its take about what has already come here, what's good, what's bad, what might I need to focus on. So, strengths of the outline, a strong distinctive premise, the combination of reliving a date time loop and a benevolent yet manipulative magic dating app is fresh and compelling. It taps into familiar romance tropes and gives them mythic, high stakes twists, and that it's modern. I'm going to focus less on the strengths and more on the weaknesses because that's where we need to change things. Potential weaknesses, stakes and loop fatigue. The repeating loops trope risks reader fatigue. While you've noted each loop escalates or remixes, the outline could use more specifics about how each loop is distinct. I agree with it on that front. Some of these specific loops are kind of generic, or we're not given a whole lot of detail about those. And that can be fine in the outline stage as long as the specific scene cards for a chapter are much more detailed about that. So its suggestion is to explicitly clarify that each loop either reveals something new or tests a different flaw. Avoid treading identical emotional ground more than once. Consider outlining what each chaotic scenario specifically targets in Tessa and Eddie. And that is a weakness in the first cut of the outline here that I do agree with, that we need to be more specific about what is happening in each one of these loops. Weakness, Cupid's endgame and agency. The antagonist arc. Cupid is delightfully manipulative, but what does it want emotionally? Is it ever frustrated? Does it learn and change, or is it just a device? If the app's nature is ambiguous, that's great, but a final moment, even just a wink that hints at its limits or evolvability, might make its role more than functional. Suggestion: consider a climactic beat where Cupid lets slip some vulnerability or humor about its own imperfection, even as it faces a genuine risk its match will fail. I think that's a reasonable thought. I don't know that necessarily needs to happen in the outline stage itself, but that is something to be mindful of on a beat and scene level, to make sure that that arc is being followed, that there is some character development, and that we get a taste of. I do want the app to feel like a proper antagonist, um, like a manipulative entity and not just a plot device. So how I would be handling that is through a dialogue more than making specific notes of things in the outline, but it is a fair observation. Aphrodite's role. Aphrodite looms in the notes but doesn't appear in the narrative beats. Is she an off-stage presence, or does she intervene, observe, or comment? Um, she is background noise. I don't know that I would actually want Aphrodite showing up in the story. Treatment of familiar therapy subplot. Chekhov's cat. Artemis and the familiar therapy specialty are charming and richly drawn, but the therapist for Familiar's ankle is explored mostly in Tessa's day job and as a metaphor. If the familiar therapy through line has story payoff, say Artemis grows and changes too, surface that in beats so that it lands. That is a fair commentary and something to be thinking about. Clarity on the loop resolution. How do they escape? The outline resolves with honest mutual vulnerability, but does the pair consciously pass a test, or is their growth organic and only recognized retroactively? Is it clear to them, or just Cupid? This could affect the catharsis and reader clarity. Um, I think that is also a reasonable point to bring up, that the outline is not super strong about. So, and that is something that I think should be put down at the beat level. Is here's how they break the loop. Maybe we're setting up their growing feelings between them, growing understanding. Um, I don't know that this is the specific way I would handle it because it feels a little bit too much like a Disney fantasy cliche, with the whole true love's kiss and now everything is broken. But I'm gonna just run with that for the moment for sake of example. Like maybe I put in the outline, their feelings grow, they kiss, and that breaks the loop. Um, that could be the way. The more I think about it, the more that would not be the way because that is too tropey for me. But just to have something specific about here is the action they take in the loops that causes the event to break. So those are some reasonable suggestions and things to think about based on the outline. So I like turning to the assistant for suggestions and as an additional thought. I'm by no means beholden to this, and I'm going to ignore it if it comes up with anything radically inaccurate. Like I don't particularly. I ask about strengths because sometimes that's interesting. I don't particularly care what AI thinks is strong with it. I'm more curious in where does it think the idea sucks? Um, where can it give me some constructive feedback, and then I can test that against my own storyteller's intuition and go, yeah, you know what, I think you're right, or nah, you're missing the mark. I know something you don't, um, and go from there. So, summary, it says the outline is structurally strong, character driven, and genuinely funny. You have a robust foundation for both pathos and comedy. Um, Minor improvements, cart out a few more loop variations for pacing and freshness. Decide how you want to how present you want Aphrodite to be. Give Artemis a mini arc and payoff. I do agree with that, and that's also partially my fault too, is that I have Artemis as a character, but I have not paid a lot of thought at this stage yet into Artemis's through line. So I would need to reflect more about that as a character, and Artemis's journey. I think that is a reasonable call out and worthy of reflection. Polish the mechanics and the release criteria for the time loop for maximum reader satisfaction. I think these are good notes to be mindful of. Now, if I close this out, I can just get back into the editor here. And if I pull up the assistant and I go in here, I can see my chat history again. So I can go back into this chat thread and continue it if I want, or I can press this to start a new conversation thread. So we can always come back here and manipulate that. Dale, good to see you, buddy. Glad you're lurking. Let me know if you have any questions. Yeah, so we're we've got 45 minutes left, but I think I've already been at this long enough to show you that my process is not push button get book. I have put my ideas into this. It has generated an outline based on my idea, which I am now reviewing and iterating on. Um, this is kind of one of the reasons I don't think there's ever been a writing TV show, is that writing is a very kind of, it's not like cooking where there's a lot of flash and sizzle and things to look at. It's, you have to think about what you're doing. And so what I'm trying to do is, articulate my thought process. So I could easily spend the rest of our session just tweaking the outline. And, if I was planning to seriously finish this and publish this in the near future, that is what I would do. But I don't think, for this debut stream and showing off the story tools, I don't want to spend a full another 45 minutes editing the outline. That might be something I do for, next week in the run up to the next stream, is edit the outline, start the next stream with, okay, here's the new outline, here's what I changed, and now let's move forward with it. So I think that is going to be the tactic I take, so that we don't have, hours or however long it takes of me really digging into the weeds for every aspect of this outline. But one thing I do want to do in the name of showing off some more of the features and the entire flow of the process is, let's at least fix this opening beat or the opening couple beats, because I want to show off generating scenes and then from there generating the text of a chapter. So we're not going to worry about the entire outline of the whole book at the moment. We're just going to drill in more specifically to how it starts. And again, I'm zooming in my UI here so that this fills the screen better for viewers at home. I missed your question. I'm sorry, I did. You have a story and you want to write, which you hope to put on the platform, but it's a fanfic. Is that okay? Yes. Fan fiction is fine. We allow that. So you can go ahead with that. We have no rules about that. The usual rules apply as far as monetization goes. Like if you are writing an Elder Scrolls fanfic or a Star Wars fanfic or whatever, I would strongly discourage monetizing those or putting those in a subscription, because then you're monetizing work that, is an IP that is not yours, and none of us want to mess with Disney's lawyers. But as far as, simply writing it or publishing it on the platform, that is absolutely fine. Okay, so I think that answered the question now. But let me know if I have missed something there. So let's look at this first beat again, starting over. We open with 2 parallel mornings in modern Mystic City. That's my reminder. I need to get back into the wiki. And we are not calling that the modern Mystic City. As a matter of fact, this would be another use for the assistant. Modern Mystic City is a horrible name. Can you give me 10 ideas for what we can call an urban fantasy city instead? I did write that, right? Let's try this again. Oh, yeah. So I put it in this chat thread here. I missed that. Okay. Here are 10 original evocative names for your urban fantasy city, aiming for the right blend of modern and mythic. Now, my way with this is almost never to actually take any of its suggestions, but they can help me think through. Maybe I take a piece of this, a piece of that, stitch them together. There are some names I've done this often enough. I know some names like Aurelia, it likes to default to. Hollow Point sounds more like a bullet to me than a fantasy setting. And Chanto, I don't really love any of these. I'm just going to leave it as Modern Mythic City for the moment, because we can edit that out. That's an easy enough name to just edit out. As they would say, we'll fix it in post. Tessa's in her cozy, plant-filled office mid-session with an anxious Phoenix familiar who keeps stress molting embers on her couch. I like that. We don't need this specific dialogue. On her couch. Well, Artemis watches from a bookshelf, muttering that Tessa gives better advice than she takes. I think we leave Artemis out of this at the moment. Across town, Eddie is in a cramped apartment with a translucent ghost of an elder woman who refuses to move on until somebody finds her lost recipe box. That's really low stakes. All right, so I'm going to save this. I'm going to try modifying this specific beat, and I want to say Eddie's client visit should be a ghost with a higher stakes concern. Something. I'm just going to leave that vague. I want to see what it does. So you should visit a ghost with a higher stakes concern. I also want Eddie to be ambivalent about using the Cupid app, but a married friend convinces. Seriously, I cannot talk and type at the same time. Convinces him he has to give it a go. So we'll modify that and we'll see what it comes up with here. Now it's only modifying one beat. It'll only take a few seconds here. And so now it's given me a lot more to work with. We open on 2 parallel mornings. They're cozy, plant-filled. Well, now it confused them. Tessa's in her cozy, plant-filled office midsection with a ghost. The spirit of a young woman who died before she could tell her best friend that she was in love with her. The stakes are painfully high. So here I would change Tessa to Eddie because that's his job. Painfully high. Okay, these are too similar. If I go cancel, I'm going to cancel. I'm not going to keep that. That was too far off. This might be another one where I take this text into the assistant and I say, here's the beat. Revise it in 3 different ways so that you've got multiple takes on things. I'm going to go in here to do some manual writing. Across town, elderly woman who refuses to move on until someone finds out what happened to her Actually, my idea, I was going to say what happened to her lost grandson, but then I'm just kind of opening up a plot thread that I'm never intending to actually resolve. So it probably should actually be something that can be wrapped up in a session. She refuses to move on until someone finds the letters she wrote and hid and delivers them to her surviving can't talk and type. So he knows how she felt. She wrote and never sent. And I should probably rephrase that a little differently, but we're going to roll with that. This detail is not needed for the outline. Tessa's phone buzzes with a Cupid notification she's been ignoring for weeks. Eddie gets a call from a friend who has been bugging him for weeks to sign up for Cupid. Eddie finally relents. Okay. So that's a little closer to where I'd go with things. I'd probably tweak this a little bit more, but gives us a starting point for the beat. And so now I can click generate scenes. And now, okay, that is not a Laterpress error. That's something else on my computer. When you get to generating multiple scenes here, there's another seed phrase box. This is your chance to give it some additional specific instructions about the scenes that it's going to generate. You do not have to add anything in here. You could click generate, but this is a chance to add in some additional details and context now so that you're not having to add those things into scene cards later. So one thing I do want to say is that when Eddie is talking to his friend about Cupid, he has been hesitant due to the cost. A Cupid costs $5,000, which he thinks is obscene. His friend responds with facts. More than 90% of people matched by Cupid are still together 10 years later. Their satisfaction rate is off the charts. Isn't $5,000 a worthy investment for a lifetime of happiness? So this friend is very much going to be an app pusher on the virtues of Cupid, and that is going to talk Eddie into taking the plunge. So now let's generate the scenes, and it's going to take that feedback plus what is already in the ordinary life beat, and it's going to generate several scene cards. Scene cards are the more specific chapter level summary of here's what's going to happen in the chapter. And from there, the next step in the process would be, once we're satisfied with the scene cards, then we can generate the actual scene text. So when it generates multiple scene cards at once, I like to review all of them before doing anything, just because I want to confirm that there is some natural plot progression. Sometimes I like all of the cards that it generates, but not the order it generated them in. So I might want to reorder them. I might find a couple of them redundant, and therefore I want to delete one because I don't find all of them necessary. They may all be good and just need a little bit of revision. So I would always recommend looking at all of the cards that are generated under a beat before taking any further action with any of them. Question: how many scenes are allowed in a chapter? So by default, our system is going to make one scene card per chapter, but you can change that. If I want to take this scene card here, I can, when I click that, now you see this gray line here. This is chapter 3. This is chapter 2. If I click this gray line, then this scene card is going to move into chapter 2 below this one. If I click this gray line, then this card is going to move into chapter 2 before this one. So that would be a way to take the existing chapters or the existing scene cards and consolidate them into future chapters. Or if you already have one chapter here, and I'm just going to add a spacebar. As you see, you can see here, press spacebar for story tools. I can press the spacebar. I can add another scene card here. And so now it's going to start blank. And now I can choose my point of view character. And we have 2 other scene card types. The system defaults to general, and general is what I personally like because it's just going to be a summary of here's what happens. We also have action types, this is much more structured. Pick your character. What's the character's goal in the scene? What conflict do they encounter along the way? Do things resolve? So this is, if you need really a lot of structure, this would be a more structured approach. And then the opposite of action is reflection. Something just happened. Now you're taking a beat to think about it a little bit more. And so you can fill out those different dynamics. Or general. I went to action. I meant to go general. And here, this feature can be used with or without AI. If you want to put scene cards in your text as road markers for yourself, this is the big fight scene between X and Y. A side character, I cannot talk and type, folks, makes a surprise. Seriously, I cannot talk and type. So what that should say is, this is a fight scene between X and Y. Side character makes a surprise appearance. So, you can use this to leave yourself notes in your manuscript about what's coming up, or a reminder about what each scene needs to accomplish as you're working through things. You could also, here, modify this, and I wouldn't actually try to modify that note. There's no context to work with, but you can instead generate a scene card. And if I wanted to use AI, I could generate this, and I could say, in this scene, Eddie undergoes the vigorous testing, screening, and personality assessment process necessary to be eligible for Cupid matching. So if I wanted to do a scene that kind of gives more context into the app, how everything works, a little bit of world building, a little bit of flavor, let's say I want to generate that scene, and now it's going to riff on that. So yeah, you can have as many scene cards as you want in a chapter. I don't think we put any hard limit on that. It's more of a question as to how long do you want your chapters to be. So now here's what it came up with for that idea. Freshly signed up and already second guessing himself, Eddie opens the Cupid app the morning after confirming his subscription to find a lengthy, magically animated onboarding sequence waiting for him, complete with a cheerful notification that his compatibility eligibility must assessment must be completed before any match can be initiated. The process turns out to be far more invasive than any standard dating profile. Cupid walks him through a multi-stage gauntlet that tests a biometric soul scan, which requires him to hold his phone to his chest and breathe with intention. A timed emotional response battery that flashes images of crowded weddings, empty apartments, weeping ghosts while logging his micro reactions, and a personality assessment so granular it asks him to rank his feelings about unresolved goodbyes on a scale of 1 to 10. I would probably make this a little bit more specific. Mrs. Calloway, still haunting his apartment, drifts over his shoulder and reads every question aloud before he can answer, offering her own unsolicited opinions on what he should select. Now, again, that ties into it's probably reading off of this and the beat. I would not have a ghost in the apartment with him while this is going on. So that's a detail I would just right away cut and then say Eddie tries to answer honestly through several questions about fear of abandonment and tendency to overinvest emotionally. Make him pause long enough that the app gently prompts him to take his time. We already know. We just want you to know too. I do like some of the snark that it's baking in here that is going to be on brand for this app. Final stage is a live interview conducted by Cupid's AI interface, which asks him in a warm yet unnervingly perceptive tone why he believes he hasn't found a lasting relationship yet. Eddie starts with a confident, rehearsed answer and slowly, visibly runs out of steam mid-sentence. When the assessment concludes, Cupid displays a results summary he can't quite read before the screen transitions to a single line. Eligibility confirmed. Your match is being prepared. Eddie stares at his phone, unsettled in a way he can't name. And again, we don't have Mrs. Calloway in here. And so now that would, I could save that as an additional scene to look at. But here's the ones that it came up with on its own as a starting point. Eddie is crouched in his cramped apartment beside the translucent ghost of Mrs. Calloway, an elderly woman who refuses to move on until her unsent love letters are delivered to her surviving husband. Okay, yeah, that is what I wanted for that. She hovers near a dusky writing desk, her form flickering with quiet urgency, while Eddie balances a notepad on his knee and his phone in his other hand, simultaneously texting closure updates to 3 other spirit clients. Now, I don't like that. I think Eddie would be more emotionally invested in his clients and not trying to be disrespectful and multitasking with them like that. So we're just going to prune that detail out. He's earnest and energetic, promising Mrs. Calloway he'll track down the letters today. Absolutely today, even as a new text notification pulls his attention sideways. His phone buzzes with a call from his friend Marco, who has been pestering him for weeks about signing up for Cupid, Aphrodite Incorporated's legendary matchmaking app. He waves the ghost off with a 1-second gesture that she meets with a deeply unimpressed stare and answers the call. No. The scene, no. I'm going to just save this for a minute. It needs to. He would dismiss his client before accepting that call. But let's see where it goes. Now here, this is where I would want the next scene to pick up. Marco launches immediately into his pitch. Eddie paces the apartment while Miss Calloway drifts disapprovingly behind him. Again, Mrs. Calloway is going to be gone when he takes this call because Eddie respects his clients. Eddie's objection is swift and firm. $5,000 is obscene, an absurd amount of money to hand over on a dating app, no matter how magical it claims to be. Marco, undeterred, fires back with the numbers. Over 90% of Cupid matched couples are still together a decade later. So here it is correctly interpreting my notes. Satisfaction ratings that no other service, human or divine, comes close to matching. He asks Eddie with the patience of someone who's made this argument before whether a lifetime of happiness isn't worth a one-time investment of $5,000, especially for a man who spends his days helping the dead grieve the love they never properly chased. Zinger. Eddie goes quiet at that. Again, I don't want Mrs. Calloway in here. Eddie rubs the back of his neck, stares at the ceiling, and finally exhales a long, defeated breath. Okay. And we have the Cupid app here. And again, I added this one. This one was the one that the system generated initially. Eddie pulls up the Cupid app on his phone while still on the call with Marco, scrolling through the sleek gold accented interface. Okay, this feels redundant to this one, and this one is better. So here I would delete this one and just roll with these. The other thing here would be that the ones it generated, I'll deal with Eddie. Normally, it's pretty good about alternating characters and making sure that protagonists get great screen time or equivalent screen time. It did not happen in this specific generation. So I see that, I note that. And one thing I would want to do here is add in some scenes that are specifically setting up Tessa's half of this. But for now, again, got about 20 minutes left in our stream, and I want to show off more of the flow and the feature set. So I am acknowledging that that is another editorial decision that I would do and that I would make. But at the moment, we're going to skip past that. I want to check here. Eddie is crashed. So I'm looking this over one more time. Okay, so there's enough. I did cull some things here, but I want to actually try modifying this to get more done in one stroke. Eddie is not the type of person who would disrespect his clients by taking calls during their meetings. He should conclude his business before the phone rings. He is attentive to her needs. Play up the humor and absurdity. I can't spell either. Of Eddie's profession. So now I wanted to revise what it wrote with that feedback in mind. I wanted to make clear that, Mrs. Calloway should be gone, and let's verify that it takes the hint and makes that change. Okay, so we have a more expanded review here. Eddie's crouched in his cramped apartment beside the translucent ghost of Miss Calloway. She hovers near a dusky writing desk. He's fully present and attentive, his phone face down on the floor beside him. Face down in a desk drawer. Notifications ignored as he walks Mrs. Calloway through the details. His meticulous notes. Yeah, so he juggles all of his cheerful manic energy. Only once Eddie's wrapped up the session does the phone buzz. Okay. I think that's pretty close. I would still edit this more, but again, there's the how deep in the weeds do I want to get on editing this to perfection in front of a live audience. Um, and this is something I'm personally going to try to improve on over time is what is the right balance between really getting deep in the weeds to show you my thought process and how I approach all of these tools and trying to really get the highest quality product that I would want to versus keeping the pace moving along so that I'm showing you things and making progress and we're seeing some movement. So that is now the plot beat. Let's say we're going to go with that as here's what happens in the opening chapter. I would now I can click the generate scene text button and it is going to write the chapter based on all of that feedback. And so this takes a few seconds here. We're just going to let it do its thing. And I am realizing as I do this already that there's one other thing I like to do as part of my process that as I am doing this live, I forgot to mention. So I'm going to let this finish, but then I want to show you all where you can add a style guide to influence how some of the text comes out so that it's not default Claude text or default ChatGPT text, but it's more specifically tailored to your voice and style and how you want it to be. But I need this to finish running before we go and do that. So it can take a minute or two here, do its thing. It's going to generate the text faster than you can possibly read it. But then I tend to just click keep it. When you do that, the text will deposit itself into the chapter in the editor, and then you can start playing with it and doing whatever you want. Okay, good. She vanished. Did she stay gone? He's pulled out his phone from the drawer. I'm just kind of quick skimming this as I go, seeing the progression of the scene. Okay, Marco is talking about Cupid. So this will happen sometimes too, and I think that is okay. Where let the scene, our default prompts want the scene to evolve, let it go. So it may partially write what another scene covers. So we're going to keep that. And now all of that text is in the editor for us to work with. I would delete the chapter details. But now if we go into the wiki here, and right up here in this corner is the settings button. And nope, that is the advanced settings. I want this settings button. So length gives the AI an idea of about how long a book you're shooting for. The point of view, you can have a default to third person limited, first person, etc. here. And style, there are a few basic styles that we have pre-built in here. For most people and advanced users, I would recommend more using the custom, have a customized pro style. And here is an open box to enter information about your style. One of the future tweaks I want to make is expanding the length of this box to give people more space to describe their style, because my full document does not fit in there. So I have to kind of trim this down or improvement. I used Claude prior to our stream to analyze some of my own writing and create a style guide about my writing style and how I prioritize things. So I copied that into a Google document here to save. And then I would put that in here as my style guide and save that. And so now if you go settings here, style, use a custom style, and it's going to have all of those notes that those would be put into the chapter prompt, the default prompt for generating text that is more in your style. I forgot to do that, so this is going to come out as pretty much Claude standard writing, which is what our default story prompt does. And so now you would be really getting really deep in the weeds here at the final level of detail, reading through the chapter, seeing the text. Is it flowing in the way you want it to? Is it hitting the beats that you want it to? How I tend to approach things at this stage is to read the chapter first, to get its pass on, to review its pass on how the scene flowed. Is the scene flowing the way I want it to? Is it hitting the beats that I want in the way I want it to? And for example, if I think it missed the mark on something, I will highlight that section in bold. And that is my way of reminding myself this is a problem area. This is something I need to edit. I don't like how it phrased that. I'm going to come back to it. And I would read through the entire chapter. Here's another example of something I would edit. So AI has a habit of repeating itself sometimes in dialogue, which you can see right here as Exhibit A. Mr. Calloway. Mr. Calloway, of course. And now we're talking about Mrs. Calloway. That's too many Calloways right back and forth. That is superfluous dialogue. We don't really need that. So I would be flagging that as a spot that I'm going to edit. And I would keep moving. And this is something that we're going to do in future streams. I will have a line editing stream going through the chapter. We'll read it aloud together. I will flag passages where I'm like, okay, this is really good. This needs to be changed, and really showing on a line by line level where I would, that was my fault. I hit the keyboard. Where I would keep what the AI is suggesting because I think it's totally consistent and on the beat and unnecessary to rephrase or rewrite, and highlight spots of shortcomings where it's like, okay, I know I can do better than that. This dialogue is flat. This description is redundant. Let me show that. Let me talk about that. So there's definitely going to be, those kind of nitty gritty technical streams where we're doing deep line editing. This is meant to be the high level general overview of a lot of stuff, but it's a 2-hour stream, so stretched out to try to be more in depth and detailed with things. Now, the generate scene text button here runs our default generating text prompt. You do not have to use that. Excuse me. So I'm going to scroll down to the next chapter here. Chapter 2, here is another scene card. I could ignore that button and press the spacebar for story tools here. And there's our various these are the default story tools that everyone has access to. You can create your own drafting tools. Drafting tools are what you see when you hit the spacebar here, and you see a lineup of all of those options. Editing tools are what would pop up if you highlight a selection of text, and then you click AI tools here, and now you've got different options. Expanding or collapsing a section of text, rephrasing it. The revision tool takes more. The rephrasing tool doesn't change the text a whole lot. It stays pretty close to the original intent, but rephrases things a bit. The revision tool is if you need more extensive, like, okay, we need to take this chunk of the chapter in a completely different direction. Thesaurus, if you need to look up one specific word, you could highlight a word, and then get the definition of the word and some alternatives that you could use instead. So these are our defaults. But I'm going to go into the settings here and show you, if you don't want the defaults, how do you make your own prompts? And that would be here in Laterpress AI. So you can see here, everything we've done today, we used about 5,000 credits. We were at about 4,600. I saved the screenshot. We were at about 5,000 credits used when we started. Everything we've done today has burned over a little over 5,000 credits. And the cheapest plan is 100,000 credits a month. And so for our 5,000, we got a complete outline. We had some conversations with the assistant about the strengths and weaknesses of the manuscript, generated a couple scene cards, and generated a full chapter there worth of text. But I wanted to show the customized story tools. And so now this is for more advanced users. If you have some skills with prompting, you feel comfortable doing that. Our default tools are meant to make the AI usage and editing more accessible, where you don't have to think about prompting. You can just run with what we've given you. But here, you click add an editing tool or add a drafting tool, and you will not see this enable for all customers. That is just something specific to my account, which is a super admin account. So I can make story tools and push them out to everybody on the platform to benefit from. On other individual accounts, you'd get the name here. You have the ability to upload your own personal icon for what that looks like, describe what the tool does, and again, scripts are not currently available for everybody. Those are still in an internal beta status. So for general users, that's going to be a book, and you could say this is called Nate's scene text generator. I cannot talk and type. Makes a chapter from a scene card. And now start with user instructions. Where scene tool is available, I would just leave that toggle off. You can change it to only work under beats or under scenes. But with that off, it'll appear everywhere, so you don't have to worry about specifying. Start with user instructions. If that is turned on, then your story tool would have the pop-up before the tool runs to add additional information before it runs. So that'd be like every time you want to run this, it would give you an opportunity to add additional specific instructions, specific editorial intent, more notes on the thrust and focus you want to bring to a scene before it executes. But you do need to remember here, if you do that, you can give yourself a prompt as a reminder of what you need to put in there. And I'll get to this in a second. So under instructions, this is where you would pick what model you're using. So right now we are integrated with OpenAI and Anthropic models. So there's different ChatGPT models, different Claude models. You can pick the one you want and modify the temperature, which means, the lower the temperature, the more it's going to try to follow your prompt to the letter. So it can be better at following instructions, but lower variance. The higher you dial the temperature, the more variance and change you could have from output to output, but it may not always be as good as at following instructions. And max output is, what is the maximum length it could write? If you're trying to have something that will generate an entire chapter in one go, or an entire scene in one go, you'd want to have this be somewhere higher. And then in the instructions field, this is where you would write your prompt about how you want things to go. You could include your style guide in here, specific instructions like do not use adverbs, do not use contractions and character dialogue, anything you want to put in there. And as reference, you can add in the story outline so that it has that as context, the idea, the characters, I'm going to add in lots of different details that already exist in the wiki and other sections of the notes that you have as context to inform how it writes things. This is for more advanced users, and we're almost out of time for our stream today. So that would be a topic for another time on prompting and how to create your own specific story tools in more depth. I just wanted to show that if you want to create your own drafting tools or editing tools to have a greater sense of control and more specific, tailoring it for your own purposes, that is where and how you would go to do that. So we've got a couple minutes left here. Are there any final questions for this week's stream? I'm happy to do a bit of Q&A. Otherwise, I think next week, what I will look to do in the meantime is refine the outline to get it closer to the state that I would consider the outline I actually want to run for the story. We can start with reviewing that outline together so you can see all of my changes and the new direction I take it, and then get deeper into playing with scene cards and generating text to advance the plot of the book. Ideally getting as well doing some line level analysis of the text that comes out of that, and where is it good, where is it struggling, how do we improve on it. I think that's going to be the focus of next week's episode. And I know I have a 15-second delay between what I am saying and the stream, so I'll give it a little bit of time. But otherwise, I do want to thank everybody who stopped in today and hung out. It's good for practice for me to start getting in the flow of doing these things. They'll get better with time. I did used to stream in the past, some video games, not this sort of thing. So I think just more repetition into it, more flow with it, upgrading the setup over time. I think these things will get better and better. And, as we grow our user base, more user feedback, more live interaction. We always got to start from somewhere. So I am, happy to be starting on this journey and just talking about our tools, what we're working on, and how they can be put to good use. Yeah, I don't see any questions that have come in here in the last few minutes. So I am going to shut down the stream for today. Hope you all have a wonderful weekend, and I will catch you next week.